Hello. So today's topic is going to be a little bit broader, and we're going to talk about how do you provide a seamless end user experience when you're thinking about expanding your on-premises environment into the cloud, or maybe you already got cloud resources and you want to wrap it into your on-premises hosted desktop environment. So, well, one thing, why is this important? Why would you want to do this? And I call it the power of one portal. Really, the idea is you want to have a seamless end user experience while allowing you as the IT administrator to model the different business workflows that you need in your environment, whether that be implementing disaster recovery or business continuity. Maybe that's looking up to the cloud so that you can essentially rent GPU instances from the cloud. Maybe that's enabling global collaboration for your workforce. Whatever it is that you need to do and the rules that you need to apply, it needs to be seamless from the end user so that the adoption can be wide and acceptable. So what am I going to show you as an example of how you can do this using Leostream? Well, basically, I'm going to show you an environment that starts with our internal VMware infrastructure, all hosted on vSphere 7 in our case. And then I'll show you how you can actually then wrap in Azure public cloud. And in my case, what I'm going to say is, well, if the user's back at their office desk, they're going to log into the on-prem VMware environment, but that same user, as they travel about, what they're going to do is they're going to leverage an Azure instance, potentially from a region that's closest to wherever that user happens to be logging in from. And then obviously a big topic these days is security. So as soon as that user does roam, we want them to actually go through multi-factor authentication to ensure that only the correct users are logging into the Leostream environment. That also means that as they roam, they're going to use the Leostream gateway to connect to the machine that they are connecting to. So with that said, let me share my screen. So here what you see is the administrator web interface for the Leostream connection broker. I'm going to log in as the admin so you can see how I have my environment set up. The first thing is just to look at my authentication servers. So in both cases, I have an Active Directory authentication server. So my on-prem users and my remote users will first log in and authenticate with their username and password. But then I've also integrated natively with Duo security for MFA for the remote users. That you can actually integrate with Duo in one of two ways with Leostream. One is using our Radius protocol support, but in this case, we do have native Duo API support, so that's how I'm doing this here. And that works really great for web browser logins. I'll show you in a second. Now for my centers, a center in Leostream, again, it's any external third-party system that we integrate with using their APIs to inventory the different desktops and images that are in that center. So here, we actually have two vCenter servers on-prem. The one I'm going to be looking at is vCenter Server 7. So I've created a center for that and then inventoried my machines and images out of there. And then I also created a center for Azure. In this case, I'm connecting to US East. Again, just to show you, it's very straightforward to create these different centers. We do support a wide range of them. In the case of Azure, pick the region and then give us the different IDs that we need, your subscription ID, etc., so that we can connect to that Azure and run the APIs that we need to run. Just the last bit of setup. As I mentioned, I am going to send the remote users through a gateway. So here is the gateway that is registered with my connection broker there. So now when I start talking about the business workflows that I want to implement in here, that's where I go into the configuration section. And the first thing I'm going to do is look at pools. So I have two pools that are relevant in this particular demo. One is my pool of VMware machines. In this case, these are my initials. So these are my machines in VMware. That way I'm not messing with anybody else's machines. Those are the machines that I'll offer for the on-prem users. And then I have my Azure VMs. Again, in my case, same method for defining the pool. But here I'm also in Azure, I'm provisioning machines. I currently have one machine in that pool. You can actually see it here in the Azure portal. It's currently sitting in a deallocated state. You don't want to be turning up compute costs, so you have your machine provisioned. It's in the deallocated state from the start. And now what happens when a remote user logs in and connects to that pool? Well, that pool, that desktop in that pool is going to go from the available state to the assigned state. So the number of available will drop to 0, which is going to trigger my provisioning that you can see here. The way the machine is provisioned is essentially defined by the rest of the settings in the pool. So I set a name, the administrator user, you need to define that for Leostream, and select the image that I'm provisioning from. This image, I created it in Azure by spinning up a machine, installing our Leostream agent, so the agent registered with the broker, and then I generalized the instance inside of Azure itself. There's some command lines that they give you for sysprepping the machine essentially, and then shut it down and create a managed image from it. Make sure that you do not add it to a catalog, you just want it to be a managed image. And the last thing I do here is I actually join that Azure machine to the domain. So our particular Azure environment actually has, our VPC I should say, has a VPN connection to the Leostream data center. So that means any user who logs into our on-prem Active Directory, leostream.net, that domain can log into either a VMware machine on-prem or Azure using their domain credentials. So since I do have that VPN connection, when I spin up machines in Azure, I'm actually going to join them to the domain as well. For protocols, just really briefly, the HTML5 RDP client, that's our Leostream gateway, provides that in-browser HTML5 connection. That's what I'll use for my remote users. And then in this case, I'm just showing you straight RDP connections. Obviously, Leostream does support a wide range of different display protocols, but RDP is great in a lot of use cases, especially if you just have task workers or people who need access to word processing, whatever. So that's what I'll show is a Leostream Connect connection, launching RDP from on-prem users, and then HTML5 for remote. The other things I'm going to point out in this particular environment, so if I'm bursting my users up into the cloud, again, you want to control the cloud costs. So I've created a special power control plan that will shut the machine down when the user logs out. And in the case of Azure, that does take it all the way down to a deallocated state. It's not just shutting down the OS, it's actually deallocating the compute, so you stop paying for it. I also have a special release plan for my remote users logging into Azure because I want to make sure that they don't just leave the machine running. So what this is going to do, if they just disconnect their RDP session but leave themselves logged into the remote operating system, 15 minutes after that occurs, we'll automatically release the machine to the pool, assuming they haven't logged back in. And that will actually trigger this section of the plan here, which will log the user out. And then the logout event based on that power control plan you just saw will then shut the machine down. So let's talk about how am I distinguishing a remote from a local user? That's done via our locations. So what I have here are, as you see, 2 locations. So an on-prem location, in my case, I'm saying I gave Leostream Connect, I installed Leostream Connect on all the client devices that are on-prem. I could also do this by changing to an IP address so that I know the client IP addresses that are in my data center. So I could just do it based on sitter of IP addresses, sitter for on-prem users. So anyone whose client device matches these rules is on-prem. For remote users, this one's a little more interesting here. My remote users have to come in through the gateway because the broker is actually locked in my on-premises data center. So the Leostream gateway is tunneling the login traffic in. So the user's client device, the HTTP header includes the Leostream gateway address. And so anyone who logs into the broker via the gateway, the Leostream gateway, is going to get filtered into the remote user's location. The last thing I'm going to point out I have this role for roaming users. And the thing I want to point out here, because I am using RDP, they're going to log in through the gateway, ultimately launch an HTML5 RDP connection. That means that user needs to be part of the RDP group on that machine. Well, by default, I don't want any users in the RDP group. That way nobody can RDP. It's kind of a security feature. So what I then have is a role option here so that as soon as the broker knows what machine the user is going to connect to, the broker will ask the Leostream agent to add that user to the remote desktop users group. That way they can actually RDP, and then we'll take them out of the group when they log out. The other thing, since my remote users are being offered Azure VMs that are deallocated when they log in, I want to give them the option to start it so that they can start the machine and then request the connection. Kind of gives them a way to be in control of the session. Finally, this all comes together in assignments here. So I don't have very granular rules. Basically, all my domain users who come on-prem are getting my on-prem policy that's going to offer one machine from that VMware pool. My domain users coming in from the remote location, they require duo. They get that roaming user role that I just showed you. So they have power control and are added to the RDP group. And they get the wandering user policy, which will offer them one machine from the Azure pool. All right, so let's see this all in action now. Here is Leostream Connect. This is our software client, runs on Windows, Linux, Mac. This is, if you remember, my location says that these are on-prem users. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And because I'm just offered a single user, very seamless end user experience, it went ahead and it launched the RDP connection in this case. And you can see the name here for the machine that it's logging into. So that's not going through the gateway. It's directly connecting to that machine. If I look here in the system log page, I can see all of that happening in Leostream. So here I've logged in, I was offered the machine, requested the connection, and then you see the Leostream agent notifications coming in. If I look at the desktops page, I can come here and look at my VMs. And there's the desktop right at the top. I can click status and see that indeed I am logged into that machine. And just so you know, I'm not kidding you, here's the center. It came from vCenter Server 7. So that was with my login. Let me go inside and sign out of this. Now let's say I've gone remote. If I'm remote, I have to go in through the gateway. You see the difference in the URL here. This is my broker. Here's my gateway. So now I'm going from the gateway to the broker. And so my HTTP header will have this information in it, and I will be offered a different policy. But of course, first I have to go through the MFA. So this is the native Duo integration again. So just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to enter in a passcode. These are one-time codes, so the fact that you see it doesn't matter. And then once that succeeds, then I get my machine. As I mentioned, it's an Azure machine. It's deallocated, so I'm going to go ahead and start it. And now I have a little feedback here that the machine is being started. You could see it happening in Azure. If I hit refresh, you'll see it start to power on here. So status is updating because the machine is starting. In the broker, I can see all of everything that's happening here. Here's my login. My policy was modified because now I'm a remote user. I requested the start. And then as soon as the desktop has finished starting, the web client will update to give me the option to connect to it. While that's going on, as soon as I'm able to connect to it, I'll click the connect button. That'll assign that machine to me, which will then trigger off the provisioning. And we'll see the next machine being started in Azure. Depending on the load that's in Azure, the machine can take a little while to start. And that's why it's actually nice to give the user the ability to request the start on their own. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect, and that's going to launch the, well, first it's going to add me to the RDP group on that machine, and then it's going to launch the HTML5 connection in my browser, which you see there. And now it'll sign me in. Now that that's happened here, you can see in the log the provisioning being requested because the number of assigned machines dropped. And so now, while I'm being connected here, it's actually spinning up the new machine inside of Azure. You can see it if I refresh my list again. You'll see it popping in there. So a lot going on in the background here in the broker, but from the end user's experience, all they knew is that they logged in, they got to a machine. They don't know where the machine is. They don't necessarily know much about how they're connecting. They just know that they got connected. And again, that's really the key, is to make sure that the end user experience is seamless. If you would like to play around with it a little bit yourself, connect it to your own on-prem environments, try it out in the cloud, we do offer a free trial. You can just contact us at sales@leostream.com. And we're happy to give you everything you need. Thanks.